This is when Gen X ruled the multiplex, in which I look at the films that played a part in the development of those of us who belong to the MTV generation. Throughout the 80s, Rob Reiner directed several films that became instant classics. 1984's This Is Spinal Tap, which I've already looked at here, is one of the all-time great comedies. 1985's The Sure Thing is a classic teen flick. 1987's The Princess Bride is a classic fantasy film. 1989's When Harry Met Sally is a classic romantic comedy. And today's pick, 1986's Stand By Me, is a classic coming-of-age drama. The script for Stand By Me, which was written by Reynold Gideon and Bruce A. Evans, earned an Academy Award nomination. It's based on a Stephen King novella titled The Body, which was published in 1982's Different Seasons, which is a collection of 4 novellas, which includes Apt Pupil, which became a 1998 film directed by Bryan Singer, and Rita Hayworth in The Shawshank Redemption, which became 1994's The Shawshank Redemption, which was nominated for 7 Academy Awards. Stand By Me is set in and around the fictional small town of Castle Rock, Oregon. As is typical for Stephen King, his novella is set in the fictional town of Castle Rock, Maine. The change in location is often chalked up to a misunderstanding. The screenwriters apparently saw the references to Portland in The Body and assumed King was talking about Portland, Oregon, and not Portland, Maine. In the present day, an adult named Gordy LaChance, played by Richard Dreyfuss, sits in a parked car and reads a newspaper article about the stabbing death of a lawyer named Chris Chambers. Gordy narrates that he was 12 in 1959 when he first saw a dead body. We flash back to 1959, where 12-year-old Gordy is a shy and sensitive aspiring writer. Gordy is played by Will Wheaton, famous for this role and for playing Wesley Crusher on Star Trek The Next Generation. As an adult, Wheaton has become a popular author and blogger. Stand By Me features a period-appropriate soundtrack, which kicks off with Bobby Day's 1957 hit Rockin' Robin, which plays as Gordy visits his friends Chris Chambers and Teddy Duchamp, who are playing cards and smoking cigarettes in a treehouse. The group is joined by their slow-witted yet agreeable friend Vern Tessio. Vern is played by Jerry O'Connell, who'd go on to star in films like Brian De Palma's Mission to Mars, and who is married to supermodel Rebecca Romijn. Chris is played by River Phoenix in the role that raised him to early prominence. He'd go on to give acclaimed performances in films like Running on Empty and My Own Private Idaho before his death in 1993 at age 23 from an overdose. Teddy is played by Corey Feldman, whom we have already seen in Gremlins, The Lost Boys, and The Goonies. Teddy, who has a malformed ear due to severe child abuse, is angry and explosive. Chris, who comes from a family with a bad reputation and who is widely assumed to be a bad kid himself, is cool and thoughtful. An excited Vern has big news. A kid from a nearby town named Ray Brower has been missing for several days, and Vern happened to overhear his older brother Billy, played by Casey Shamasco, known for Young Guns and 3 O'Clock High, and Billy's friend Charlie, played by Summer School's Gary Riley, talk about how they came across Ray's body 20 miles away near the railroad tracks, having presumably been struck and killed by a train. Billy and Charlie can't tell the police about the body because they were joyriding in a stolen car when they discovered it. Vern, Gordy, Teddy, and Chris decide to go on an overnight expedition to find Ray's body, figuring they'll be hailed as heroes and will get their pictures in the paper. While packing for his expedition, Gordy encounters his gloomy parents, played by Marshall Bell and Frances Lee McCain. Frances Lee McCain played everybody's mom in the 80s. Thus far, we have seen her playing Kevin Bacon's mom in Footloose, Zach Galligan's mom in Gremlins, and Leah Thompson's mom in Back to the Future. Gordy's parents are in deep grief over the recent death of Gordy's beloved older brother Denny. Gordy's dad makes no secret of his wish that Gordy had died instead of Denny. A morose Gordy flashes back to Denny, who is played by John Cusack, who had just come off of starring in Rob Reiner's teen romp, The Sure Thing. Gordy meets up with Chris, who is bringing along a handgun on their quest, because if there's one thing 4 hyper 12-year-olds absolutely need on an unsupervised overnight hiking trip, it's a loaded gun. Chris and Gordy are tormented by a pair of mean teenagers. Chris's older brother Eyeball, played by Bradley Gregg, and ringleader Ace, played by Kiefer Sutherland, whom we have already seen in The Lost Boys. After joining up with Teddy and Vern, the boys hike along the train tracks in high spirits, singing the Have Gun Will Travel theme song and bantering with each other. They decide to save time by taking a shortcut through a junkyard. While Teddy, Vern, and Chris hang out at the junkyard and talk about how Annette Funicello's tits have been looking bigger on recent episodes of the Mickey Mouse Club, Gordy buys supplies at a convenience store where the cashier reminisces about Denny, who was the town baseball star. The cashier is played by Bruce Kirby, father of the late character actor Bruno Kirby, whom we saw in This Is Spinal Tap. When Gordy returns to the junkyard, he's chased by the owner's attack dog Chopper, who has been legendarily trained to go straight for the balls. Gordy runs for his life and manages to make it to safety before Chopper can bite off his balls. While Vern and Teddy do a synchronized dance routine to the 1954 hit Lollipop by the Chordettes, Chris and Gordy have a man-to-man talk in which Chris urges Gordy not to let let his parents or his friends prevent him from fulfilling his dream of leaving Castle Rock and becoming a writer. The boys get stuck midway across a railroad bridge when the train comes. They run for their lives. Vern panics and collapses, but Gordy helps him across in the nick of time. They camp for the night around a fire. Encouraged by Chris, Gordy tells a story about a pie-eating contest hijacked by a kid named Lardass, played by Andy Lindbergh. Lardass gets revenge on the town bullies by drinking a bottle of castor oil and eating some raw eggs before wolfing down a bunch of blueberry pies. This leads him to vomit copiously, which of course makes everyone else in the crowd vomit copiously as well. This is a long, gross sequence that doesn't have much to do with the rest of the film, but it sure does seem like the kind of story a 12-year-old aspiring author would write. After Gordy has a nightmare about his brother's funeral, Chris comforts him. Chris has long been suspected by everyone in town of stealing his classroom's milk money. He breaks down in tears as he confesses to Gordy that he did indeed take the money, but he had a change of heart and turned it in, and his teacher kept the money and let him take the blame for the theft. In the morning, the boys continue on their journey. While crossing through a pond, they end up covered in leeches, including one that sticks to poor Gordy's junk. While all this has been going on, Bad Eggs, Ace, Eyeball, Charlie, and Billy have been engaging in general hoodlum activities. These include giving each other tattoos with razor blades and playing mailbox baseball, which is exactly what it sounds like. When Charlie and Billy confess to stumbling across the body of Ray Brower, Ace decides they should find it and claim it for themselves. Gordy and his friends find Ray Brower's body exactly where Billy and Charlie said it would be. Instead of feeling triumphant, they're all quietly devastated. The sight of the corpse triggers Gordy's complex grief about his brother's death, and once again Chris comforts him. In the middle of this, Ace and his gang arrive and announce their intention to claim the body. Chris stands up to Ace, Ace takes out a switchblade and threatens Chris, and a deadly serious Gordy whips out the handgun and drives Ace and his gang away. Gordy decides they should anonymously report the body to the police. The boys hike back into town, where they part ways. An adult Gordy narrates that Vern grew up to become a forklift operator, and Teddy has spent his adult life in and out of jail. Encouraged by Gordy, Chris defied the town's low expectations and went to college and became a lawyer. While trying to break up a fight between two strangers in a restaurant, he was stabbed to death. Adult Gordy, now a published author with kids of his own, writes up his memories of that summer, ending it by saying that he never had any friends like the ones he had when he was 12. As I mentioned at the start, the original title of Stephen King's novella was The Body. The film takes its title from the 1961 Benny King soul hit, which plays throughout the film. It's a sentimental title, though this is not a sentimental film. The kids are crass, and they have hilariously inane conversations about whether Mighty Mouse could beat up Superman, and a lot of really gross things happen. There's an entire sequence devoted to projectile vomiting. It's often a very funny film, and a very sensitive one, with a script that captures the way kids think and speak. All four young actors turn in career-best performances. They genuinely seem like a gang of close friends. I especially like the relationship between Gordy and Chris. They're kindred spirits, and they protect each other and understand each other on a deep level. They know they'd die for each other without ever having to say it out loud. When I looked at Back to the Future several months ago, I pointed out how it reflects the 1980s fascination with the 1950s, as the newly adult baby boomers were beginning to explore the nostalgia they felt for their pasts. The same applies to Stand By Me. Stephen King and Rob Reiner were both born in 1947, and thus are quintessential baby boomers. In Stand By Me, and in King's source novella, The Body, they're examining their formative years, the 1950s, much in the way many of us Gen Xers are now exploring our formative years, the 1980s, through the pop culture we create and consume. A kids' film with a great deal of appeal for adults, Stand By Me was made for Gen X kids and for our baby boomer or silent generation parents. And now, 35 years later, it's a film aging Gen Xers can view from the same perspective our parents had when they first saw it, looking back as adults on what it was like to be young. A while back, I looked at Richard Donner's The Goonies, which was released a year before Stand By Me. It's unintentional, but in some ways Stand By Me seems like a response to The Goonies. Both films center around a gaggle of preteens, Corey Feldman included, who go on a life-changing adventure without adult supervision and grow up a bit along the way. But while The Goonies is all goofy escapism and wish fulfillment wrapped up in an impossibly happy ending, the life-changing adventure in Stand By Me is more bittersweet. This is a film about death. It's about a quest to find a body. The recent death of Gordy's beloved brother hangs over everything Gordy does. The dead kid, Ray Brower, is about the same age as our young protagonist. He'd been killed by a train, much as they could have easily been killed by the train on the bridge. Chris comes close to being stabbed to death by Ace, and then actually will be stabbed to death years later. Stand By Me is a coming-of-age film about coming to terms with the inevitability of death, and coming to terms with the idea that nothing lasts forever, not even those intense childhood friendships that form the center of your universe when you're 12. Next time, there is going to be some Big Trouble in Little China when I look at John Carpenter's 1986 cult classic. Thank you for joining me here today, and I am looking forward to seeing you here for that.